Hey there everyone, Hitesh here and welcome to the Docker series. In case you haven't watched a couple of previous videos, go ahead, watch them, hit that subscribe, and let's move forward. Now before we take down this Docker and try to understand what we actually can do and build something using Docker, it is very important to understand this final fundamental concept, theoretical part, about virtual machine as well as Docker concept. I'm going to show you a couple of proofs that they are going to help you to understand how things are going on with the Docker. So let's get started. Now, first and foremost, we are going to take a look on how these virtual machine works here. Now, I'm not talking specifically about your machine or your laptops, maybe desktop. I am moreover concerned about how these applications are deployed onto the huge servers like Amazon, maybe a couple of other companies who are using these concepts of virtualizations in the production grade application. So let's just say this is a computer of Amazon. Let's just assume it for a minute. So in the case of virtual machine, what happens is a layer of hypervisor is installed on these machines. Now in the regular your laptops or your computer, it's not like that. You first install an OS and probably a hypervisor goes on top of that. Of course, we are not talking here or discussing about the type 1 hypervisor or type 2 hypervisors. That's for theoretical part, maybe some other day in your master's class. But right now, this is the basic core concept. Now, on top of this hypervisor, what happens is in the production grade application, you get a couple of containers, kind of containerizing, sandboxing kind of environment in which you install a guest operating system. This guest operating system can be Ubuntu, can be Windows Pro, Windows Home, or maybe a Macintosh as well. So there are a variety of things you can do up here. On top of that, we have some of the configuration files as well. And on top of that, some application is being loaded. A case of having an hypervisor in the production grade machine, for example, Amazon. But how does this entire concept of virtualization is different? Why do we need any other alternative when we have already this kind of virtualization concept? Now, you are absolutely right. We actually don't need any kind of other modification in the virtualization. This sandboxing and everything works perfectly fine. But it is very resource hungry and it consumes a lot of resource. When we do have these guest operating system, running a couple of instances of the entire operating system is pretty resource consuming. And the way how this hardware should be performing, it doesn't perform up to the mark till a long time because we have so many of these guest operating system installed, and having an entire operating system is pretty tricky. And especially when you're not using the entire or all components of these OS. So it's like almost a wastage of so much of the resources. Now, how Docker came forward, it's like almost a virtualization, but they added their own layer in the virtualization to help us these concepts. So in the case of containerizing or Docker application, what happens, still we have got hypervisor. That's why in the Windows Home, you need to install and enable the virtualization, and we need a Hyper-V and all those kinds of stuff. So that's why at the core base level, again, we have a hypervisor. Now, on top of that hypervisor, we have an operating system. It can be any Windows or Mac or whatever you like to have. And then it creates a Docker engine layer. Now, this layer of Docker engine, I'm going to show you what layer it is and what are the commands that you can find your layer of that Docker engine as well. This basically or majorly is a Linux layer, regardless if you are on a Windows or Mac. This Docker engine layer is a Linux layer. Now, on top of that, we install these containers, and these containers are configurations and apps, whatever we are having. Now, this Docker engine helps in finding that OS and whatever the layers that we are having. Now, again, the big question is, if the Docker layer is an Linux or is a Linux, then how come I'm able to run it? I'm on a Windows or I'm on a Mac. Now, this is the beauty of the Docker application. So what we need to do is go on to your little right hand side bottom. If you're on a Windows, turn on this Docker. And if you're on a Mac, turn on the Docker, and I'm going to open up my terminal. So let me open up my terminal where it is. There we go. So make sure your Docker is running, and when I run this command, Docker version, when I run this one, notice here it says a server and it says Docker engine. So this Docker engine, of course, community edition, because we are working on the free one, this is actually responsible for having this entire containerized application. And not only that, if you'll check out here, there might be some versioning going on in here. So there we go. This is the OS Arch and it says Linux. So regardless if you are on a Windows, Mac or Linux, wherever you are still installing a top layer of Docker Engine, which helps us in containerizing these applications as well as to run these applications. And always understand, remember always this diagram, no matter where you are always installing a Docker layer or Docker Engine layer so that it helps us in containerizing these applications. So that's the basic core foundation concept and a little bit difference in the container versus the virtual machine. The only difference majorly is virtual machine is very resource hungry. Even running one or two virtual machine at the same time in any laptop or even in the production grade hardware, it's actually very resource hungry. On the other hand, because of this Docker engine, it's actually so easy to have these applications and it's not at all power hungry. So that's it, basic foundation of what is container and what is virtual machine and how they are different. I think these two comparison diagram are going to help you to understand them side by side. So that's it. The theory is actually over and now we need to talk more on to what we can actually do with the Docker. What are the commands that we need to remember and how we can find a lot about these Docker. So that's it. Theoretical part is all over. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to one step further into Docker understanding and what we can do it. But there's going to be a lot more diagram because without these diagrams and charts and all of these, understanding the Docker is pretty tough. So expect them a lot.